All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast. This is Ryan Shumpert. My name is Rick Butler, here in our normal spot in the press box. And while it is a nighttime sky outside, it's like 5 or 6 hours than when we normally have done this season. So that's not a bad deal to work with.
Yeah, I know for sure. Tennessee played at 1 today. Most of their games have started at like 7:30, so maybe a good 6 hours, six and a half hours.
Yeah, no kidding.
Before we usually do. So a lot earlier. Like you said, it's the night sky, but definitely a more early podcast tonight after a Tennessee blowout victory.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We're going to break it all down. We've got a lot to get into today. Not only are we going to be talking about this game that's ahead of us, not only are we going to be talking about some of the things that happened in the early slate of games. Again, just for transparency, it's only about 6:30 p.m. as we record this in the Eastern time zone. So we might be scoreboard watching a little bit throughout this game, huh?
Yeah, we will. Minnesota just kicked a field goal to cut Penn State's lead to 26-25 with just under 6 minutes left. They had it first and goal at 7, went backwards. So paying attention to that one, that's really the only one I think that's in the closing minutes right now. Obviously, those night games are about to get started probably by the back half of this podcast.
Yeah.
So some games there, and then obviously some big games earlier in the day for Tennessee that broke the Vols away.
Yeah, no doubt about it. A lot to get into, a lot to talk about here on this show today. And while parts of this show might be a little bit different, might be a little bit shorter than what we've normally done, I'd imagine that, Ryan, when we come back together next on Wednesday, Thursday with Jack Foster, whatever it may be, I'd imagine a mega episode of the RTI Press Pass podcast. But we will get into the reasons why as we go. Let's talk about what happened right here in front of us today, a 1 o'clock p.m. game here in Knoxville, Tennessee. It was a cold, cold day here. But fans still showed out for senior day, for salute to service. Tennessee gets a big 56-0 shutout win over UTEP. Now, that sort of score is not out of the ordinary. It's not unexpected or anything like that. But maybe the beginning of the game was a little bit unexpected, was a little bit out of the ordinary, at least in comparison to, you said it down there on the field reaction, at least sort of in comparison to what Tennessee has done to non-conference foes of this level at the past. Tennessee starts out the game with 3 offensive punts, but then after that, I believe it was 7 of the final 9 drives of the game all resulted in a Tennessee touchdown. So they certainly got the train rolling, but it definitely took a minute to get it up to speed.
Yeah, no, it did for sure. And a disappointing first quarter for Tennessee. They've come out quick in most of these games in the past after a loss against Georgia last week, and an opportunity that you can only make so much of a statement by playing well in these type of games to the committee. You can make a lot more of a statement by playing poorly. I expected, at least I expected Tennessee to come out and really come out quick and dominate from the jump. And they didn't do that, but in the second quarter, they got things rolling. Really, and it's obviously, again, very different because the game was going to be decided this way no matter what. The last play of the first quarter last week in Tennessee's loss at Georgia felt like a huge one. Georgia's offense had done nothing.
Right.
They get the broken play, or they get the free play. They hit about a 40-yard pass. Well, in this game today, the last play of the first quarter, Tennessee's offense had done nothing, and they hit a little screen pass to Dylan Sampson for about 15 yards on a 3rd and 8. So, again, obviously a much different feel. I have no question or no doubt that Tennessee still would have won handedly if they don't get the first down. But much like last week, the final play in the first quarter sparked Georgia's offense. It felt like the final play of the first quarter tonight sparked Tennessee's offense, and they went on to score a touchdown on that drive and 4 of them in the first half.
Yeah, you're right. Quarter. And that's kind of wild to think about, because if you told me that Tennessee had a 28-0 lead at halftime after that first quarter, I would have said, I don't know if Tennessee's going to be scoring 4 touchdowns. Did Boo Carter have a reception? Did Jermod McCoy have a pick six? Boo Carter did have a couple of big punts, and Jermod McCoy did have an interception in the end zone in the first half. But Tennessee's offense really was able to pick things up and get it going a little bit more. Tennessee scores 28 points in the second quarter, 21 points in the third quarter, and then closes things out as the game was winding down with just a touchdown in the fourth quarter. But again, all that wraps up together to make a 56-0 victory over the UTEP Miners.
And it was really the middle quarters where Tennessee did that damage, and especially right around halftime. I mean, Tennessee, they got the ball back with, I want to say, like around 1:30 left in the first half of this game. 1:01 in the first half. Now at midfield, but out of timeouts. And Tennessee put together a nice little drive. And Brew McCoy had his first touchdown of the season on that drive. Nico Amalion found him for an 18-yard score, kind of in a fade-type route in the corner of the end zone. Scored with, I believe, 8 seconds left. So, that feels like a big play just from the sense that Tennessee probably doesn't score a touchdown if they don't hit that pass there.
Right.
They probably have to settle for a field goal. That puts them up 28-0 at the half. Then they come out and they get the ball to start second half in a minute 23 drive. They go 67 yards on 4 plays, and Brew McCoy has his second touchdown of the season on that very same drive. So a lot of damage in those middle quarters, and even just you can shrink it even more. Just really the 2 minutes, the 3 minutes around the halftime break is when Tennessee went from comfortable lead, they're not going to lose this game, to blowout.
Yeah, and you talk about Brew McCoy there, obviously one of Tennessee's most veteran presences on this team, a guy who, from all that we know, is a complete workhorse inside the locker room. I can't imagine that going through this point in the season without a touchdown. I can't necessarily imagine that was affecting his confidence too much, but I also feel like Brew McCoy is a guy who wants to do everything he can to win. So I got to feel like, man, putting 2 scores into the end zone on senior day, final regular season game here in Knoxville of his career, had his family right there in the family section. I got to imagine that that's the type of game that can really kind of get some momentum going, get the juices flowing again. Not that I felt like Brew McCoy was in a confident slump or anything, but hey, you score 2 touchdowns in any game of the season. It's going to be big, and it just so happens to be late in the season when Tennessee really needs, all cylinders to be firing at the same time and as best as they can.
For sure. I don't know how much I think this leads to anything else or anything like that. This is going to be some sort of spark from Brew's season. But, just obviously a good guy and he's worked back from a tough injury last year and has been close a couple times this season to having some scores. So, good for him to get in the end zone on senior day. Good for us to get some cookies, Moonshine Mountain cookies.
That's right.
Where I'll be
Go
headed
get them
when we leave here. But no, a good performance for him. And obviously almost always senior day comes with some sort of good vibe. And I would say Brew McCoy was atop the list today.
Yeah, absolutely. Just good to get that off his back. Looking at Tennessee's running game a little bit, Dylan Sampson goes for 77 yards on the day, which is I believe his season low.
It is, yes.
But only 11 carries. He's still averaging 7 yards a carry. Tennessee did not need him as much, and they were certainly able to get a lot of other guys reps in rotation throughout the day. Dylan Sampson goes 11 for 77 and a touchdown. But what about Peyton Lewis? He continues to emerge here in this backup role as he replaces Dylan Sampson, as he replaces Deshaun Bishop, who is hurt, who was Dylan Sampson's previous backup. Peyton Lewis on the day, 7 carries, 46 yards, and 2 touchdowns. What do you think of the way that the freshman is running the ball? It's kind of, it's obviously been the last couple of weeks, getting a little bit more momentum. What'd you think of his game?
Yeah, he's a very physical runner, obviously a north and south runner. And he had a good game. He ran the ball well again, I thought he ran the ball well last week, and he's been solid for Tennessee when he's had to play. So a good game for him, a good game for Cam Selden, who came in and got some run after him. I think had 9 for 44.
That's exactly it.
And a touchdown. So those guys behind Dylan Sampson were good, which you'd expect them to. And, it was good. It was obviously you want to see Dylan Sampson keep padding stats just from the standpoint of how he's had such a good year and the historical, aspect of it he could have. He was still in the running to have the most 100-yard games in a single season for Tennessee.
Right.
Barring a deep run in the playoffs, that's not going to happen at this point. But, it makes sense. He's had a lot of carries, taken a lot of hits this year. And this is a game that Tennessee didn't need him as much. And I think in actuality, they did the right thing. They just gave him 11 carries. I think he didn't play again after the first drive of the second half, maybe the second. And it was, getting a lot of work for the younger guys. And those guys ran the ball well and got the job done.
Yeah, and ultimately that's what a game like this is for. Now, it is late in the season, so it's not like this is early in the season. You want to get guys fresh reps into the season, but it's always good to get players experience on the field. And certainly when I look at the box score, 7 carries for Peyton Lewis, 9 carries for Cameron Selden does sort of fit that mold.
Even 4 for Khalifa Keith there too on I believe Tennessee's last drive of the game.
For 39 yards as well. He broke off a 23-yarder. That was impressive. There were a couple of big plays in this game. I believe it was 7 runs of more than 10 yards, and I believe it was 5 passes of more than 15 yards in the day. Are those numbers correct?
Those numbers are. That's good memory.
29 from Nico Imaliava, which was just a giant little sequence between Dylan Sampson, Nico Imaliava, and then Dylan Sampson again. Got Tennessee flipped the entire field in just 3 run plays. But we talked about this last week, and obviously all of this is taken with a grain of salt. It's Georgia versus UTEP, but Tennessee was not able to hit the explosive plays, even just plays at 15 yards or more. That was a little bit more in the rotation here today, which, again, grain of salt, as you would expect, and as you would certainly hope for if you're Tennessee.
For sure. I think, if anything, it was disappointing the lack of explosive plays in the passing game. For 25 yards to be the biggest pass play of the game, they only have 2 passes of over 20 yards. Nico did some good things throwing the ball in the intermediate.
That miss could have been there.
Yeah, I mean, Squirrel White touchdown could have been a touchdown on a ball over the middle of the first drive. Brew McCoy, he overshot on one early in the game, and then from there on out, since he didn't take a ton of shots. So, not that it was a solid performance by Nico and not a bad performance by Tennessee's passing attack, but given they were playing UTEP, it felt like they left a little bit to be desired.
Yeah, especially when you had that first quarter, right? That just goes so as poorly as they did. You told me this on the instant reaction show down there. I think it was something like 2 of 6 maybe in that first quarter.
2 of 6 for 14 yards, not necessarily in the first quarter, but the first 3 drives.
There you go. 2 of 6, and considering where he finishes 7 of 17 to 23, only 6 incompletions on the day. That's not too bad. 209 yards and 4 passing touchdowns for Nico Iamaleava. Again, as Tennessee runs out to the 56-0 win. Before we flip sides of the field real quick, because I don't know, there's not too much to talk about from the defensive side. We'll talk about the big play from the first half over there in the end zone. But first, Boo Carter continues to show a little bit of juice at the punt return position. I am looking for the stat. I don't know if it's going to 3 punt returns on the day, total of 61 yards, 20.3 per. At one point, he set Tennessee up on the 3-yard line. Maybe with the help of a penalty, although I think that was declined. One play later, Peyton Lewis punches it in for the 1-yard touchdown. He really is dynamic back there, right? He shows you why he was that two-way player at the high school ranks. He shows you that he is pretty electric with the ball in his hands. Now, maybe a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Adventurous, I think you could say. So I think that's something that Tennessee certainly has an eye on, but boy, is he dynamic in the punt return spot.
For sure, and Josh Heupel did talk about that after the game. I can't remember exactly how Josh Heupel phrased it, but something about kind of chaos and being a little bit on the line there at times, sometimes going a little bit over it. But he's been really good, and he's made a lot of plays. And look, Squirrel White and Jermon McCoy are the 2 guys who got shots to return punts before that. They were both a little chaotic and made some mistakes back there without having that big play explosion early in the year. So I guess I understand to that extent why they didn't give Boo Carter as many shots early in the season, but I think it's no doubt the reward outweighs the risk when you talk about the fact that there's a risk element with those other 2 guys as well.
Yeah, here's what Josh Heupel said, which we might get into some of his quotes a little bit later on as well. But I said this about Boo Carter providing a spark at the punt return position. He has made some big explosive plays. The guys up at the line of scrimmage have done a great job of getting him started. But he's the right combination of control and command. And I'm going to say playing on edge, reckless abandon a little bit, you know what I mean, on the right side of that arrow, and just done a really good job back there. Want to catch the one clean today, but it was a huge part of the game. Field position matters so much, it changes calls. Obviously, again, like what we said a second ago, Boo Carter was able to set them up on the 3-yard line. One play later, Peyton Lewis punches it in for a Tennessee touchdown. So we'll see if that can continue being a dynamic aspect of Tennessee's game, especially with how often Tennessee fields punts with the way their defense is able to play. We'll see how much that affects things as we go, but he certainly is tremendous with the ball in his hands. Can fly around the field in a way that few people can.
For sure. For an offense like this, it's struggling for an offense like this for Tennessee is struggling this year. Those big punt returns, they change games. They're really important. We saw that last year with D. Williams and how impactful that was in a handful of games. Obviously, the A&M one is the one that the most notably comes to mind. So, 100%, he's been good back there for Tennessee, and it's certainly provided a bit of a spark.
Trick plays were something that the Tennessee defense had to deal with a little bit. That is not familiar, I should say. Is that correct? Going back to what Tennessee had last year with the Austin
It is
game?
Familiar, yes. Scotty Waldrop, I think that's how you pronounce his name, or I know it's Scotty. Is UTEP's head coach. He was Austin Peay's head coach last year,
right?
And Austin Peay ran a lot of trick plays and even past trick plays, just like odd formations and kind of interesting looks, and we saw that from the jump. We saw that really from the beginning to the end of the game. UTEP was still running, so I had a double pass in the 4th quarter. So
2 double passes.
Yeah, you saw a lot of that, and Tennessee, for the most part, did a good job. A play or two, the play that Jawan Jennings threw a touchdown pass in both the Super Bowl and Tennessee's loss at Florida in 2015. We saw UTEP hit a pretty big play on that. But it was right after that.
27 yards.
It was right after that second play when Jermon McCoy had the interception. So, as a whole, Tennessee's defense seemed prepared for it and did a pretty good job against it.
Yeah, Jermon McCoy makes a tremendous interception in the end zone. He actually spoke about that after the game. If you head over to Rocky Top Insider, if you're not already there right now on YouTube, you can go and find out what Jermon McCoy said. It was very early on in that press conference, so hopefully shouldn't be too hard to find. But yeah, it was a shutout win. It was 0 points on the board for the Miners. Not a ton to get into, not a ton to break down from that kind of thing. Again, like you said, I think that there were times in the game where UTEP was maybe doing some things specific for this Tennessee game, specific to try to throw the Vols defense off their axis however they could. I think that maybe it worked a couple times. Again, we're talking about some of those trick plays, but ultimately, UTEP only finishes with 149 yards passing, 81 yards rushing, not too bad. And then I believe lost a fumble, maybe even lost two. I don't know if this ESPN says two. I think they're wrong. I think ESPN's wrong.
Well, they fumbled two, lost one.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of hard to break down a shutout win, but you can nitpick it, and I'm sure we might throughout the week. But ultimately, Tennessee's job gets done to protect the checkerboards.
Yeah, they bounced back the way you'd want them to after a rough performance last week, and I think the corner is what stands out. Jermon McCoy, the interception, made some nice plays, and then Ricky Gibson, he forced one of those fumbles, the one Tennessee recovered. He had good coverage on a little mesh route. It was only going to be a very short gain, and he rips the ball out too. So a very, very nice performance from him, and Tennessee's defense as a whole played well today.
All right, anything else in the game before we move into some of the other happenings around college football? It is quite the chaotic day.
Yeah, no, I think we're ready to get to everything else.
All right, so the nice thing about Tennessee's 1 o'clock p.m. game today was that the two key games that I think a lot of Tennessee fans were looking out for, they both kicked off an hour before that at noon Eastern time. First one we'll talk about is Ole Miss at number 9 Ole Miss at Florida, a 12 o'clock noon game there in Gainesville. Boy, oh boy, Florida wins that game 24-17. Jackson Dart throws 2 interceptions during it. The final interception came in the final 30 seconds. Tennessee put it on this Jumbotron right here, and this crowd went wild. There were Gator chomping all over the place. Tennessee needed a favor from the Gators, and Florida came through for Tennessee. That is huge in itself. Now, in a different part of the country, over in a different conference, Ohio State, as David Pascal said to Josh Heupel in the press conference, clobbered Indiana. I believe it was 38-20.
38-15.
38-15. Thank you. I knew that 5 was there somewhere. Certainly wasn't at the beginning of their number.
No.
38-15. No. That's kind of that sweet spot that we were talking about last week. We'll dive into that a little bit more, but I think the big news of the day is that Ole Miss loses, who's 2 spots ahead of Tennessee, who is in that quartet of ranked/nearly ranked SEC teams with 2 losses. That was huge news for Tennessee.
Yeah, for sure. And that you would think puts Tennessee back to controlling its own destiny. Obviously, there's a scenario that our friend Jack Foster's been all over of the A&M beats Texas next week, and that would add another 10-2 team to the fray. How does Tennessee shake out in that mix? I would think Tennessee would still be fine with a win over Vanderbilt, but you don't know for sure. For the most part, it seems like they're fine. And a very you looking at
did that just go final?
Yeah, no. Penn State put together a 6-minute drive to ice the game that converted 3 fourth downs, including a fake punt.
I didn't see that.
Including a fake punt at their own 30-yard line. So that was the other big one. I don't know if we might have mentioned that at the start. Penn State, Minnesota. Penn State holds on and survives an upset 26-25 against Minnesota on the road. But no, the Ole Miss game, I mean, it kind of felt in some ways like the Kentucky game they lost where they moved the ball well. They turned the ball over on downs twice inside the 10-yard line. And then obviously their last 2 drives in with interceptions and plus territory. So
technically 3 interceptions too. One of them just got called back, but Jackson Dart, and I believe that was. Please don't quote me on it. It could be wrong, but I want to say it was the first time in Jackson's career, first multi-interception game of Jackson Dart's career, either in a really long time or maybe even at all. But it was something that I at least said to myself, that seems to be a little bit uncharacteristic.
Okay, yeah. I don't know. I think it was maybe a Matt Corral game I'm thinking about a few years ago where he threw a ton of interceptions. I was thinking maybe that was Dart at first, but I'm not sure. But, obviously a huge game for Tennessee. Really big that Florida was able to come through and pull off the upset. And then kind of moving over to the Indiana-Ohio State one, you're right. It's in that border line where you're thinking, all right, is this enough for Indiana to drop out of the playoffs if Tennessee's in that last spot? Look, I've continued, and I said last week I'm skeptical, even though I think they should do it in a game like that where Indiana was largely uncompetitive today. They couldn't move the football. I just didn't think they were going to do it because of the politics of it. Now, what I think they'll be more prone to do is Tennessee jumping Indiana if Indiana is still in the playoffs. If they're not taking Indiana out of the playoffs and you still have that divide, I think that's really possible. And I'll be really curious to see what the committee's rankings are this Tuesday. You wouldn't think it would change after that point, though. The Tennessee-Indiana aspect of it wouldn't change after that point. But you really never know with the committee. So both those games went really well for Tennessee. Obviously, it would have been awesome for Tennessee, and Minnesota could have pulled off the upset too. And they were in that game start to finish. And then a couple more big games tonight when you talk about obviously the Notre Dame Army game, and then Oklahoma, Alabama, and then even you go a little bit further down the list. It's not going to have direct playoff ramifications, but LSU Vanderbilt can do something for Tennessee's resume, can do something for some other teams' resumes who have been leaning on big wins over LSU, who, if they lose tonight, will be in danger of going 7-5, 6-6 this season.
Yeah, a lot of things went Tennessee's way, especially, again, those first two games being before Tennessee kicked off today. That was really nice because it sort of gave us, at least in the media, a good idea. One eye on those games, one eye on Tennessee's games. And then, of course, that was a pretty cool moment for Tennessee to put up Florida. I wouldn't think that there'd ever be another moment where Tennessee, it was not a sold-out crowd by any stretch, so maybe 90,000 Tennessee fans cheer that unanimously for Florida. There might have been a couple people in the crowd who didn't know what was going on, who didn't know why they were cheering, and that always happens. But certainly things went Tennessee's way today. Here's what Josh Heupel said after the game about Ole Miss and Indiana losing on Saturday. Obviously, that helping Tennessee's CFP playoff chances a little bit out. Quote, I said it, there's a lot of football left to be played. We've seen it. We've lived it, both sides of it. It's about controlling yourself and preparing and going and playing good on Saturdays. And I'm proud of the way we handled this week and heal up this afternoon and tomorrow. Invest and prepare the right way, practice in a great way. Then we need to go ahead and play great football next Saturday as we take the field in Nashville. Sounds like a very Josh Heupel quote. Doesn't sound like anything different from what we've heard the last 4 years. But that is on their mind. Whether it be the media that told him about it or somebody else inside the program, inside the locker room told him. Tennessee's aware of what is in front of them, of what was happening today. And certainly, like Josh Heupel said, it's about controlling yourself and what you do next.
For sure. And frankly, one of the harder games on Tennessee's schedule. Not that it's just an incredibly difficult game, but a road game against a solid Vanderbilt team. Certainly not a great one. I'm not even trying to go as far as saying good. But a solid Vanderbilt team that's going to have a lot to play for, just like Tennessee. So it'll be a big test for Tennessee. And look, when Tennessee's offense has struggled the way it struggled this year, you're just not – most games are going to be pretty competitive if you can't score a lot of points.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about that later in the week as we go. But plenty of good stuff from Tennessee.
Hey, here's my question for you. I think the Vanderbilt fan base area pretty well. You grew up just a couple minutes down the road from it. Obviously, there are a lot of rivals that would like a moment, to potentially end a Tennessee Volunteer season, right? Something like that. Put them behind the 8 ball at the last minute, pull the rug out from under them. Do you think there's anybody that would like to do that more than Vanderbilt would? No,
Kentucky's the only other one that I'd even put on that same level. I mean, Vanderbilt.
We might even have to go to basketball for that to really come to fruition.
And for Vanderbilt, I mean, when I was growing up, Vanderbilt made DVDs when they beat Tennessee in games. They sold T-shirts when they beat Tennessee in games.
Oh my God, that was
it's the biggest thing on Vanderbilt football for them to do is to beat Tennessee really ever. Obviously, they collected a number of them from James Franklin. Even in the Derek Mason, there's a great stat. I don't remember it now, but something like Derek Mason in 6 or 7 years at Vanderbilt won like 13 SEC games, 12 SEC games. Like 3 or 4 of them were against Tennessee, and like 2 or 3 more were against Ole Miss. It's like half his SEC wins were against Tennessee or Ole Miss.
That is outstanding.
Obviously, Vanderbilt has beaten Tennessee a number of times, not in the last handful of years, but they've beaten Tennessee a number of times in the last 15 years. But I don't think that lessens how significant that game is for the Commodores.
No, not at all. And the fact that Vanderbilt could have an opportunity to take Tennessee out of the playoffs, out of the first 12-team playoffs, right when they just got in to ruin the season here in Knoxville. That's what college sports are all about. That's what in-state rivalries are all about. And certainly Vanderbilt is going to be not only playing for their own season, but playing for a little bit of pride in that sense. And then certainly the fans are going to have every understanding and impression that, they can really put Tennessee in a bad position, take them out of the playoffs potentially with a win over there in the mid-state. So a lot to get into over the next week, a lot to get into about not necessarily this game, but just what is ahead for Tennessee. And then, of course, it's still only 7 o'clock right now, so still got more college football to watch tonight to see how some things shake out. But Tennessee, the big news of the day, I guess you could say a 56-0 shutout victory. But the big news of the day for Tennessee is that they do get a little bit of help in front of them that people have been so desperately wanting out of this weekend. Tennessee does control their own destiny at this point. But again, the Vols handle business right here in Knoxville on Senior Day in the regular season home finale with a 56-0 shutout win over UTEP. Tennessee, again, a little bit slow to start the game. The engine's a little bit slow to fire up. Tennessee with 3 punts to start the game, but 7 of 10 drives scored, resulted in a touchdown over the rest of the course of the game. So not bad at all for a Tennessee team that was able to pick things back up. You can, of course, nitpick some things, and we might do that. We already have done that a bit, but ultimately that is how the day went for Tennessee. Not a bad day if you're one of these players or coaches in orange.
No, 100%. It's gone well for Tennessee, and like we said, all tournament,
Who is that?
Well, I think it's Arizona State's coach. Arizona State stormed the field after beating BYU, but it appears that they're going to have to put 1 more second back on the clock. So they're going to have to get everybody off the field.
BYU situation.
And BYU is going to be able to throw a Hail Mary. So,
oh wow, what is the Colorado?
Colorado lost. Kansas beat Colorado.
Did you see that hit?
Very dirty hit.
Very dirty hit. Very dirty hit. I'm glad we agree. All right, anything else before we wrap this up?
We're good.
I would say it's a late night, but it's not late. It's not in comparison to where we have been. So hopefully we can get this out to you a little bit sooner. Hopefully more of you can see this on Saturday as opposed to Sunday. But again, it's game 11 of the season. For everybody who has stuck with the RTI Press Pass or instant reaction down there on the field throughout the whole season, can't tell you thank you enough. This was our last game, most likely, from Knoxville this season. And we always appreciate the support over on the Rocky Top Insider Networks, which you can follow at Rocky Top Insider on all different social media platforms. If you want to follow Ryan Shumpert, you can do so. I would recommend doing so at rshump00. That's SCHUMP. If you want to follow myself, that is at Rick_Butler. But of course, again, at Rocky Top Insider, RockyTopInsider.com, where you are going to find your Tennessee news, notes, and coverage. Let's go ahead and get out of here. Tennessee defeats UTEP by a score of 56-0, a shutout win in Knoxville. Man, playoff conversation lies ahead. We'll be here for all of it. Thank you very much, and have a good day.